Hangin with Mr. Douglas.
What's up, everybody? Hey, thank you for hanging. Today we're going to do a little bit of a book report show on Druffel's, pretty sure it's Druffel, How to Defend Yourself Against Alien Abduction. It's a good book. I recommend you check it out. There are some serious gems in this that overlap the conversation I had with Nate, that overlap a lot of what comes out of the empowerment talking points, the sovereignty talking points, and where we find ourselves in relation to beings that invade our space. Let's just say that. They invade and step over our lines of self. And she talks about how some people repeatedly discovered ways in which to resist and defend against these intrusions, these invasions. I will read from the back here just to get us started. In 1988, Druffel, who had researched UFOs for 40 years, discovered a little-known fact that had been drowned in abduction hysteria. Documented evidence that people have successfully fended off attack by the Greys, the short, big-eyed aliens now familiar through so much popular media. Using her database of 250 case studies, including 70 resistors, Druffel has ascertained 9 techniques that witnesses use to ward off alien entities and even break off abductions in progress. And perhaps even more astonishing, this evidence points to the possible true identity of the Greys and their link to the abducting entities of myth and folklore. Again, it's a great book. The abduction resistance techniques, as listed on the back: mental struggle, block their mind control; physical struggle, fight back; righteous anger, summon your inviolate rights. Inviolat rights. I'm going to look that up really quick. I want to make sure I'm saying that right. Inviolate.
Inviolate.
Yeah, inviolate. All right. So it would be inviolable and inviolate. Yeah, thank you. Righteous anger. Summon your inviolate rights. Protective rage. Guard your loved ones. Support from family members. Seek strength in numbers. That's why we're all here together. Intuition. Sense them coming. Metaphysical methods. Create a personal shield. Very interesting, and I'm gonna... We'll pontificate on that one a little bit, too. Appeal to spiritual personages. Get help from on high. Repellents. Use time-tested, fend-off substances. The bug spray isn't just for bugs anymore. Complete with hair-raising true tales of courage and illustrated with eyewitness sketches, How to Defend Yourself Against Alien Abduction is the only book with step-by-step instructions on what to do and not to do if aliens come a-knocking on your door, or pass through your glass window or wall or ceiling or something. Here we go. We'll pull from choice moments. First, I want to start with a section from her beginning titled, What on Earth is Going On? What on earth is going on? So within this section, she starts to break down the 6 groups of individuals that she has come across in her research and reporting. Group 1 of the people who've been abducted consists of witnesses who appear rational, honest, and socially productive. Psychological testing confirms this. They are generally cooperative and open to investigation, but most of them desire anonymity to protect their privacy. I don't blame them. Those who are willing to speak out publicly do so without ulterior motives, such as gaining personal notoriety or financial profit. Usually society doesn't treat you too nice when you do it. So, more props to absolutely everyone who is courageous enough to look at this in the face and talk about their personal experiences. My hat's off to you, truly. Thank you. You give me courage. They benefit from reassurance and support by experienced researchers, and in time are able to assimilate their abduction experiences into their lives with minimal anxiety. And we have countless representations of that on UFO Twitter X. Again, I would argue you are, in some sense, the tip of the spear of humanity when it comes to stepping us up as a species when we have to face the facts that we're not alone, that we haven't been alone, they are here, and some of them are assholes. So, okay, that was group 1. Group 2, individuals also seeming to be reporting real events, but the trauma resulting from their abduction experiences causes them more psychological damage than group 1. They have a tendency to become dependent on supportive techniques, sometimes draining energy and time from investigators. However, they are sufficiently stable to recognize this and make attempts to remedy the situation. Group 3, witnesses appear extremely damaged, both emotionally and mentally. Their behavior is consistently neurotic. They drain researchers of time and energy to such an extent that normal support techniques are of minimal value. The content of their abduction reports, however, does not vary significantly from groups 1 and 2, and it's entirely possible that their experiences are just as valid. There are subsets within the human species that are more sensitive, and sensitive is not a knock. Sensitive, I would argue, is some unlock when it comes to living, just not living in modern society, or at least in a city center. Group 4 seems to be psychotic individuals who probably hallucinate or imagine their abduction experiences. Even though a real experience might lie at the core of their statements, their stories are complex in the extreme, and new details constantly emerge. These victims are, in essence, psychic vampires who constantly are seeking support, reassurance, compassion, and above all, belief. It's 2026 now, and again, this was written in 1998. I will not discount those that have the apparent label associated to them of psychosis. We don't know how the mind works, and perhaps these individuals, some of them, I don't know, may be tapped in at a level that becomes incredibly destabilizing within a modern frame. Group 5 is composed of hoaxers who continuously fabricate their stories. They constitute only a tiny fraction of the abductee population, perhaps 1 or 2%. It might be a little more. Their reasons for hoaxing range from prank playing to a pathological need for attention. They're going to be all over the place, not just in this community, but in all communities, especially in our modern environment when attention is a form of currency. So, yeah. Group 6. 6 surfaced unexpectedly during my review of the more than 200 abduction cases I investigated personally between 1965 and 1988. And was discussed in one of the 2 new chapters in the 1989 paperback edition of the Tujunga Canyon Contacts. Haven't read that one, will do so. In my 1988 journal article, I wrote, "This group may be large or small. Little is known about it, and very little has been published in UFO literature concerning individuals of this type. They are fully rational, truthful, and productive persons. Although they report experiences similar in content to those related by groups 1 through 3, they differ dramatically from other abductees in that they report they have been able to break off the traumatizing experiences and prevent further contact with the harassing entities by the use of simple mental and physical techniques. It is possible." Before I go on, I will also say, I don't know if all of these work. Again, one of them in particular I will dig into a little bit more because of personal experiences and uses. But the situation is complex and intense, and from what I have looked into and been exposed to and listened to and learned from, it does seem like, at least in a good amount of these abductions, there are consistent reports of being dominated psychically. And, you hit the mind, a lot else trickling down from that becomes almost impossible. However, it doesn't seem like it is completely impossible. In fact, hold on one second. Let me find this one dude. I watched this. Timothy Alberino had a great interview with a gentleman who he and his brother discussed their lifelong experiences, un momento, and it's a great episode. I do recommend it. Mind-blowing alien abduction, the stories with Chris and Sean O'Leary. I know I believe Chris is on X, and he discusses his experiences on X. Yeah, again, the video is great. Definitely recommend checking out. Their experience is wild. But briefly, to summarize how they became aware of their experiences, his brother was being returned from an abduction, and Chris was outside looking at a UFO in the sky and having these kind of psychic interactions, suppressing his desire to first even acknowledge that something was in the sky, then trying to rationalize it away, at one point thinking it was an advertisement for Star Wars, like it was a Death Star balloon moving around in the sky. But then he felt the very strong urge to go tell his brother. And this sequence of events is fascinating because all the while he is muscling up the kind of muster to go and go to his brother's door where he was resting in his room, supposedly. He kept getting these mental suggestions to no, don't go in there, don't bother him, he might have a gun. His brother was a cop. You don't want to, you might get shot, you might wake him up and surprise him. Like the stuff that would never occur to him otherwise was suddenly very persistently present in his mind. He disregarded them, broke open the door, and the timing of this entire sequence kept his brother awake enough to where, after he was able to get into his brother's room, he brought his brother into the car, said, we got to find this UFO. It's up in the sky. Check it out. Drive with me. He and his brother went through a sequence of events. I won't go into super detail. Watch the video. Worth it. Where they both remembered what was happening, what had been happening to them. And it was a series of kind of memory retrieval interactions the two of them had, which goes into, find support in numbers, tap into your fam. There is something to the hold that they have that is not complete. You can rest free, at least when it comes to the memory portion of all of this. But yeah, so Chris O'Leary, Timothy Alberino's video, worth watching, fascinating interview. I recommend. So, right, okay. The discovery of Group 6 was a revelation. If some abductees were able to fend off the entities, perhaps further study of the individuals in this group might yield solid evidence concerning two important aspects of the abduction question. First of all, could the personality traits that enable Group 6 individuals to resist intrusive entities be identified? Second, could these techniques they use be taught to others? And an obvious third aspect of this study, could these reports possibly reveal clues as to the basic nature of these intruding entities? In other words, if some human beings could fend off intrusive aliens, this might present evidence that UFO abductions were not technologically superior extraterrestrials, as many UFO researchers theorized. These entities might be something else. I began a study of Group 6 with the intent of compiling a database of similar cases, having been devised by scientists and statisticians that at least 200 resistance cases were necessary to obtain significant results. In order to alert the UFO field that this study was being undertaken, I continued publishing data as it emerged in a series of articles that appeared in major UFO publications in the United States and England. The response to these articles were twofold. Many objective researchers, such as Berthold E. Schwartz, M.D., the late Richard M. Neal, Jr., M.D., John Miller, M.D., and others, encouraged the study in this new aspect of UFO abduction, and a couple of colleagues, including veteran UFO investigator Dawn Worley's, generously shared documented cases in which witnesses had apparently been able to defend themselves against harassment. Also, many individuals around the country reported their own successes at fending off typical UFO alien abductors. And within 3 years, my database climbed from a half-dozen individuals to more than 40, and the defense techniques described, all simple mental and physical processes, increased from 3 to 9. These responses were what I was hoping for to further develop what I initially called the fend-off study. A different type of response to these introductory articles, however, was unexpected. I quickly learned that the subject of resistance against UFO entities was controversial to the extreme. Yeah, here we go. Many colleagues in the field, including high-profile researchers, voiced their opinions that defense against UFO alien abduction was impossible, period. Some informed me that the aliens had merely permitted the witnesses to believe they'd broken contact. And, again, the mental level of control and influence that they do exert, you can't rule that out completely. Others, who favored the hypothesis that UFO entities are helping us evolve, objected to my study, contending that witnesses shouldn't resist. I mean, wouldn't you resist if someone was trying to forcibly drag you into a van? It's basically the same thing. Get up out your bed, I'm taking you with me. No. Others felt the abducting entities are extraterrestrial with superior technology, therefore resisting them couldn't work, and the witnesses were merely fooling themselves or making up stories. So dismissive. Another colleague engaged in an extended exchange in the UFO literature, contending that because of my research, some abductees might try resistance methods and fail, and that failure would add to the trauma they were already experiencing. Therefore, this colleague charged, encouraging abductees to try resistance techniques could be considered unethical. Again, if you're in a situation you don't want to be in, why would you not take steps to not be there anymore? Remove the alien element from it. Like, what kind of advice is that? Not advice that I would share in. These specific charges and objections will be discussed in greater detail in the following chapters. In the meantime, I would like to point out that the successful resistance, as discussed in this book, applies mainly to reports of the type of bedroom visitors termed greys. And yeah, they seem to be the predominant visitors when it comes to quote-unquote UFO abduction situations. The reports concerning this type of harassing visitor are so prevalent that the image of the spindly, bug-eyed creature has entered into modern culture. Again, this is 1998. This lady was way ahead of her time. Appearing in advertisements, cartoons, and other popular forms of the media. In the advertising media, they are usually portrayed as benevolent or harmless. As far as the extraterrestrial hypothesis is concerned, sightings of landed UFOs associated with alien occupants who seem to avoid interaction with humans might possibly indicate clandestine Earth surveillance. In some of these, the craft or occupants interact minimally with the witnesses. For example, blinking lights from the UFO apparently answer light signals directed toward the UFOs by the witnesses. Or in other cases, the occupants might look at the witnesses curiously for a moment or make some obscure hand gesture. Or in cases where the witnesses seem to come too near too fast, stop them by paralyzing them briefly, just long enough to make their escape. This type of temporary paralysis is reportedly accomplished with some type of small instrument held in the UFO occupant's hand, and differs from the generalized paralysis reported by abductees. At least one scientific researcher has hypothesized that this is microwave produced rather than associated with altered states. I wonder how they're actually doing it. Don't stand too close to your microwave. Contrasted to these shy UFO occupants who make it plain that they do not wish to extend interaction with witnesses, the Greys and other abducting entities appear extremely interested in members of the human race. Their extended interactions are, in the words of witnesses, intrusive, harassing, interfering, and unwelcome. Yeah. While the majority of outdoor sightings with shy occupants seem to be physical in nature, current hypotheses being developed by several objective researchers suggest that the Greys might be interdimensional in nature, or alternatively, that they may normally exist in an invisible portion of our own electromagnetic spectrum. 1998. In other words, they might not originate in our normally perceived space-time. That is, those very limited portions of the vast EM spectrum that are detectable by human senses. Side note, De Garzia, an Italian researcher who I made a fun little animated video of his process of remote viewing, remote sensing, he wrote a very interesting paper discussing reported alien abductions and putting together via the quantum holographic model an interesting breakdown of how very well they could be operating, how time as we perceive it might actually be described as dots on a piece of paper with little spaces in between them, or frames in a film reel, and that these beings might natively exist in between each frame or in between each dot of experienced time, and that abductions are a process of pulling a person out of their dot of experience and placing them in the in-between zone, or in the place in between the frames. Hey, there's an interesting short film title. Yeah, I thought that was interesting. Little piece of information to tie in with this book report. Both hypotheses speculate that these so-called grays possibly have the ability to enter into our normally detectable space-time and become temporarily physical. Both hypotheses, to me, seem to be logical working assumptions. If the grays are truly interdimensional in nature, that is, coming from a space-time continuum coexisting but separate from ours, this might explain why intrusive human-visitor interaction most often occurs in some type of altered reality, involving an as-yet unidentified altered state. Hypnagogia? 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 How do you say it? How do you prefer the word? I like hypnagogia. I could be very wrong. I'm going to look it up. I like hypnagogia. But what does a Google say?
Hypnagogia.
Google says hypnagogia. Whatever, Google. All right, so it's hypnagogia, I guess. Where was I? Right. The same thing might apply if they are usually invisible to us by reason of their existence in normally undetectable portions of our own EM spectrum. The evidence to date indicates strongly that many abduction scenarios are real at some level of reality, since large numbers of psychologically sound individuals report them. The following chapters detail descriptions of 9 resistance techniques that have been described by several dozen rational, honest, and productive human beings, plus a couple of other techniques that are in the stage of being investigated. Each case involving the 9 techniques has been carefully researched and documented. Some of these resistance techniques are effective when the initial approach of visitors is sensed, but before they are visible to the victim. Others are effective after initial paralysis sets in, before or after visitors have materialized in visible form. Other abductees have attained success even after the abduction is fully underway. One of the techniques can be used after an abduction scenario to help prevent the return of the unwanted intruders, and some of these 9 techniques are most effective when used in combination. The main reason for this book is that thousands of people, mostly in the United States and increasingly in other countries around the world, are reportedly being caught in a terrifying situation involving contact with harassing, unidentifiable creatures. Such human beings need help. This book gives both hope and practical help. It demonstrates how dozens of human beings like themselves have been caught in similar situations but have been able to put an end to them. It is only fair to point out again that other UFO researchers, some of them prominent and respected, disagree with the information presented here. The objections of these colleagues will be presented in later chapters so that readers can judge for themselves where the truth lies. Even if all abduction scenarios prove to be some type of psychological aberration, as some skeptics and debunkers conclude, the resistance techniques described can still be effective for Group 1 through 3. They would also benefit Group 4 provided these experiencers truly wish to defend themselves against further visits. Individuals who fall into Groups 1 and 2 would benefit most as they are in full control of their own mental states. I emphasize again that some readers may feel that the motives of the Greys are benevolent, or they may have faith in researchers who contend that the so-called aliens are here to evolve us. If these readers do not want to try to resistance for any reason, they have a perfect right to refuse. I'm not trying to persuade them to act against their wills. This book is also meant for the reading public who are simply curious about the widely reported alien abduction phenomenon. But in particular, it is for those who are seeking help in ending unwelcome interaction with unidentified visitors. This is central to the through line of this show. What can we do about it? Okay. Resistance technique number 1, mental struggle. I won't read the entire piece, she does a really nice job of summarizing the main points of each chapter, which we will hit, and then I will pull out the underlined bits that I found compelling to underline. Mental struggle, effective against the first stages of abduction, particularly paralysis and a general feeling of terror. A high-pitched, irritating sound is at times involved. When used at these initial stages, the second phase of abduction, calmness or compliance with the entity's wishes is prevented. A feeling of confidence on the part of the experiencer that the technique will be effective, either from prior personal experience or assurance from a trusted source, is essential. A stout-hearted feeling that the intruders are violating your inalienable rights must be sustained. Maintain patience. This technique requires strong internal silent struggle directed toward moving one small part of the body, usually a finger or a toe. When the movement occurs, the paralysis usually breaks abruptly and the visitors vanish. For a few witnesses, the movement of the body parts must be progressive until the paralysis is broken sufficiently to allow the experiencer to call for help. Now that's a nice breakdown of Technique 1, a highlighted portion that I selected from this chapter. A sense of outrage against the entity's violation of the witness's human rights must be maintained as well. In maintaining this sense of outrage, this ain't good, I don't want this, no. It is helpful to regard the creatures as beings who are not superior, technologically or intellectually. There is considerable evidence that some abducting entities are posing as superior. Sure. However you want to, they're going to try to convince us. Doubtless, many abduction researchers cause witnesses to believe that the entities are extraterrestrial and therefore technologically superior. The three main keys in using mental struggle successfully are conviction that the technique will work. That comes up often. Sense of outrage against invasion of your human rights. Number 2. And number 3, inner assurance that the technique works just as well for terrified witnesses as it does for those more fearless by nature. Conviction that it'll work. All right, we'll read this excerpt here. It was not too many weeks later that he, a gentleman named Bershad, awoke in the middle of the night, paralyzed, realizing that something had entered the window. The creatures had not yet materialized, but as he explains, I knew. I saw everything but the outline. There was absolutely no doubt in his mind. He lay there thinking, okay, my super objective here is to jump out of bed and call Melanie, but I can't do that yet. I'm trying, but I can't. I'm too terrified to do that yet. So I'll very slowly move my finger. There's nothing they can do to stop me from moving my finger. Like Emily Cronin and Melissa McLeod, he was successful in moving one finger. But the paralysis did not suddenly break as invariably happened for them. It is entirely possible that it did not break abruptly because Bershad did not expect it to. Emily and Melissa had discovered the mental struggle technique through sheer accident and instinct. Bershad, on the other hand, expected that a step-by-step process would be needed. After he moved one finger, he was able to move his hand, then his arm. That's how I eventually got my leg out from under the cover, got out of bed, and went over and called her, he relates. And I remember standing there by my telephone, terrified, and she answered, and I just said something like, Melanie, and she said something like, are they there now? I said yes. I know exactly what's going on, she told him, using the reassuring phrases they had agreed upon. As long as you need me to be on the phone, don't worry, I'm not going to hang up. I don't care if you're on the phone for the next 5 hours until 10 o'clock in the morning and you don't say a word, I'm not going to hang up until you tell me it's okay to hang up. Okay, said Bershad, still overcome with terror because of the presences in the room, but he stoutly maintained his confidence that he could remain in control of the situation as long as he did not disperse his energy by losing his focus and letting his terror take control. If this occurred, he would lose his power to control the situation. Melanie then slowly asked him a series of questions, which he answered mostly in monosyllables. Finally, he felt that the unseen presence was getting impatient with him. It doesn't like this, he told her, and it can't do anything to me as long as I'm talking to you. Finally, the presence suddenly departed. I remember thinking, it's gone. It was like whoosh, and the veil was lifted, and I could talk normally, he relates. I told her, Melanie, you know what? The damn thing is gone. The little cowards. Get back here. You know, that sort of stuff. Melanie inquired if he was sure everything was okay. He assured her that the presence had gone, and that everything about the room and his own reactions were entirely normal. Thank you for being there, he told her. Bershad used this technique, a variation of mental struggle, a couple of times during the next year or two, and from about 1992 does not remember ever having another experience. Today, Druffel writes, he is free from abductions. Sometimes the idea crosses his mind that the creatures, whatever or whoever they were, might still be visiting him and that he has absolutely no knowledge about it. He feels so free, however, that to his best judgment, his method of taking control was effective, and he is convinced that it did indeed stop the visitations entirely. This book is full of these accounts, and they are riveting to read. Resistance technique number 2, physical struggle. The technique is effective against initial stages of abduction before the onset of paralysis. The sense of violation of the witness's rights must be uppermost in their minds. A feeling of confidence on the part of the experiencer that the technique will be effective is not essential if anger against intrusion is so overwhelming that the urge to fight is swift and virtually instinctive. Now, I will say, watching American Alchemy's episode discussing the Allagash encounter, where the urge to fight from the one gentleman who was a black belt was very strong. The Greys did react by putting some kind of restraining device on him, so that, they got nervous, which means that it has potential to be effective, and they had to have a countermeasure in place. But though that was during an abduction, this is talking about before you get sucked up onto a craft. More deliberate use of physical struggle, much as employing weapons such as sharp objects or firearms, adds to the witness's self-confidence. The technique can be instinctively employed when entities are already present, or used in a more deliberate manner with weapon backup when the entities are seen approaching outdoors. The intent should never be to kill or seriously injure the intruders, but to inform them that their presence is violating the witness's right to privacy. There is a caution here by Anne. Firearms are not recommended in urban or suburban areas where small children and or innocent bystanders may be jeopardized. That moment in Communion with Christopher Walken as Whitley Strieber and the shotgun, that reminds me of. Physical struggle, though, that's a biggie, and it kind of makes sense. Some great drawings in this book. So I'll talk about, it happened twice, fairly close together rather recently, but it was in a dream state that did not feel like a dream state, where it felt like I was awake in my bed, and I couldn't see another entity, but there was a clear voice in my head telling me to relax, go to sleep, just go to sleep. And I had this deep down urge to say no. And in the dream, which was not a dream, I was just, I felt like I couldn't move, and I was trying to struggle out of being so relaxed to the point of pseudo-paralysis. But I was able to move my head back and forth, and I was able to do that more and more and more and more until I swung myself in the dream that wasn't in a dream awake. And then I woke up, and the room was exactly the same, except the lights were off. In the dream, the lights were on but dim. That is an experience that resistance experience has happened before. It happened recently in quick succession, a couple of nights. But that mirrors this kind of mental to physical resistance situation. Yeah. Okay. Resistance technique number 3, righteous anger. There is some overlap in some of these techniques. but it's good to get into them specifically. Righteous anger. This technique is effective when used in initial stages of abduction and is best employed before onset of paralysis. It is also effective for paralyzed witnesses when combined with sustained mental struggle. Fearless witnesses use this technique instinctively, but less fearless witnesses can learn to use it effectively by increasing their understanding that their rights are being violated. Righteous anger often builds up after repeated visitations and abductions, but the anger must be focused toward asserting one's rights rather than actual hatred directed toward the intruders. Yeah, that seems to be a blind or a feint or something they can use. It doesn't. She talks about it. That doesn't seem to help. It's, no, don't mess with me, not I hate you. I hate you. I mean, this technique is best combined with strong commands, either verbal or mental, such as go away, leave me alone, and so on. Even though frightened, experiencers can learn to think logically enough to put a protective plan into action using properly focused, righteous anger. Anger, not hatred. That's a good distinction, I think. Anger is a proactive emotion. Hatred can be rather toxic and tends to do a lot of self-damage, in my experience. Okay, a highlighted bit from an individual's personal experience. The woman was naturally frightened at the sight of the creature, but she was also angry, as she explained to Baron, because the entity had the nerve to come into her bedroom and invade her privacy. Instead of lapsing into terrorized silence, she made an exclamation of surprise, jumped out of bed, and turned on the light. The creature and the column of light to which it clung remained in full view. Huh, yeah, caught you. And the witness had ample time to observe all details of its physical features and clothing. The two stared at each other, only about 3 feet separating them. No communication, telepathic or verbal, passed between them. The woman thought about fleeing through the nearby bedroom door, but instinctively felt that the column of light would somehow get her. She noted that everything seemed abnormally quiet. That also ties back to the de Garcia explanation, where in his research exploring the abduction reports that he looked into, this one individual was at a club late at night, dance club. I think it may have been in Italy or Germany, but he was in the bathroom, and all of a sudden he felt himself get super tired, kind of pseudo-passed out. Then next thing he remembered, he was laying flat, floating on the ground with these beings, these gray beings, pulling him along, and he was able to look either side of him, and everyone was kind of still and fuzzy, like in mid-motion, when... if you've done shrooms and you see the trails that your body makes, it's kind of like that, he said. Not with the shrooms reference. But there it is, that abnormally quiet experience could be a representation of the space between the frames. Finally, the witness, in spite of her continuing fear, yelled at the creature, "Get out of here!" Immediately, the column of light seemed to bubble with colors. The entity climbed toward the ceiling as if climbing a ladder. That's some creepy horror imagery right there. Looking at her all the time it was climbing. Also creepy. When it reached the top, it disappeared through the ceiling, and the beam of light vanished with it. The witness experienced no immediate aftereffects. Instead, she left the bedroom, got a hammer and a screwdriver from the kitchen, and inspected the ceiling and windows, looking for possible entry marks that would explain to her logically how the creature came through the ceiling. She could find none. In order to assure herself that she did not dream or otherwise invent the experience, she placed the hammer and screwdriver on her dresser so that she would see them in the morning. There they were. It is important for witnesses to wish to learn how to use righteous anger to realize that this particular technique must be used in the initial stages of abduction. Typically, this requires 4 elements. The potential victims are awake, or at least think they are awake. They are capable of moving their bodies sufficiently to take a threatening stance, or at the very least utter threatening verbal demands. In my experience, I had trouble speaking. I was trying to phonate no, and had real hard time saying that. When I swung myself out of the dream, I finally was able to say no, and again just was like, oh, when I woke myself up. physically lifting myself up. Hey, look, it could have been a bad dream. Though the repeated nature of it, like the exact same situation, the exact same premise, I don't know. But I was happy I read this book at the time. They have, this was point number 3, they have either an instinctive or acquired strong sense of their own rights to privacy and freedom from unwanted intrusion. Yeah, I got that. Number 4, they have enough self-esteem, either natural or trained, so that righteous anger bubbles to the surface easily when these rights are jeopardized. Righteous anger. Okay. Protective rage. The main intent of this technique is to protect other members of the household. Again, rage, protective rage, righteous anger, not hatred. Especially small children and others unable to protect themselves. Again, I've heard accounts where it is difficult and especially frightening when individuals with children realize that their kids are being taken too. And my heart goes out, because that is especially terrifying. I don't know if these will have the kind of success in those instances, but here we have at least some written accounts of it working. This technique is best employed before paralysis sets in, since it involves the human voice used strongly and assertively, using rejecting statements, even well-chosen curses, hurled toward the intruders. Protective rage must be focused toward the intruders who are violating your rights. Like righteous anger, it must not be rooted in fear and despair from which negative results spring. Uncontrolled anger is never effective, according to Druffel. The term protective rage might seem contradictory, but it is in its illogic that its effectiveness is rooted. Rage in this context means ardor, which encompasses fidelity, love, and loyalty, all of which are devoid of negative aspects. You're standing firm for something, and that something is being, or at least attempting to be violated, and you will not stand for that, and you will take all steps in which to represent your stance. Protective rage is combined with a wish that the intruders not be harmed, only told to cease their visits and leave your family alone. Hold no grudge or hatred after the fact. The technique can be used at the time of the visitations or afterward. When used after the entities depart, it is best combined with other techniques to ensure lasting results. Just a few highlighted bits here. It isn't known just how the technique of protective rage works, especially when used after the fact. We can, however, offer a speculation. Perhaps the self-confidence and self-esteem of the person using it builds a psychic shield over the home. Self-confidence, self-esteem, self-assuredness, these themes, again, repeat. Confidence that these techniques will work. Perhaps the entities, whoever they are and whatever their true source, can actually sense the rejection being hurled at them, even when they are not physically present. The technique might even be related in some way to the processes of exorcism, by which trained ministers, priests, and spiritually minded psychics can cause unwholesome entities who are apparently possessing human beings to depart. This is not to say that the so-called abducting aliens are akin to those orders of creation called devils or demons, terms that equate in the Judeo-Christian tradition with fallen angels, although the parallels are most interesting and should be explored further by qualified researchers in ufology and religion. There's a neat little section at toward the end of this book where she looks at the overlaps between abducting aliens and the jinn. It's fascinating. Little highlighted point: uncontrolled anger rooted in fear and despair is never effective. The experiencers should hold no grudge or hatred after the fact. Tough to do. Support from family members is number 5. By family, we mean not only blood relatives the witness lives with or sees often, but also close friends. The old adage, 2 heads are better than one, applies here. Members of an experiencer's family may already be acquainted with the phenomenon of harassing entities and found ways to fend them off that they all can share. The abduction phenomenon is generational in nature. Again, 1998. Support from family members must be directed toward solving the problem of the visitations, not directed toward curing the experiencer's emotional trauma by consulting therapists who have no knowledge of bedroom visitors. Family support is best used in combination with other resistance techniques, especially when other family members are experiencing the same type of harassment. Family support is used naturally in close-knit cultures where harassing entities are recognized in religious and societal beliefs and not just as folklore. Re-recognition of old-world information and faith in the family members offering it is necessary for successful results. Re-recognition and faith, there is that self-assuredness that will work. Okay, resistance technique number 6, intuition. The earlier resistance techniques are employed, the better the chances for success. Intuition breaks the progression of events before they begin. Perceiving the creature's approach intuitively permits experiencers to prepare themselves emotionally for the creature's arrival, adding confidence and strength to the resistance techniques they plan to use. The visitors seem to detect that their intended victims are ready to resist, and often don't bother to come, knowing that their attempts will meet with failure. Perhaps they are intuitive as well. I mean, that ties back into their heightened psi-seeming abilities. And if they can sense that we're going to put up a fight, that alone seems to add a layer, according to Druffel, of protection. The intuition technique is akin to how some soldiers on the battlefield sense the presence of the enemy or other dangers and save themselves from danger. Intuition also prevents accidents or other harm in civilian life. Many people, I would say all people to one degree or another, we all have got this innate intuition. She says, many people are intuitive, but the talent is often suppressed in early childhood in the Western world. Have confidence that intuition is a human talent, and trust that it can be developed. Yes. Confidence. There it is, right there. You guys know The Sound of Music? I have confidence. It's a good song. That's a good song. If experiencers are not intuitive themselves, sometimes another person living in the home can sense the approach of visitors and can rouse the experiencer, ending the abduction scenario abruptly. I would love to narrate this entire book. I actually emailed Penguin Publishing Random House today about narrating it. If anybody's interested in supporting that idea, send out a message to Penguin Publishing. I would love to narrate this book, put it out as an audiobook version. Resistance technique number 7, metaphysical methods. Metaphysical methods of resistance are deliberately induced in altered states that the witness fully recognizes as differing from everyday experiences in normal space-time. Envision protecting bright white light coming from a source above you, flowing through the top of the head, spreading downward through the entire body, and extending out a few inches around you. Keep your eyes closed. The intensity of visualization is enhanced by physical relaxation. White light produces a protective shield over the experiencer. Persons using it see and feel the light and have confidence that it protects them from harassment. Metaphysical methods are not commonly used by most humans living in Western cultures. Even so, metaphysical methods such as internal sound can be learned by persons who are highly motivated. So yeah, this is one of the ones that I really wanted to dive into. White light mentioned, the gateway tapes. It's one of the things that Robert Monroe has you do in your process. You have I don't think he says it's a luminous, but it is your own personal light balloon of white light that you generate from pulling energy into you, pulling it up to the top of your head, and then spreading it out as a light balloon around your body. There's that. Robert Bruce, the guy who writes extensively about psychic protection, energy work, and out-of-body and astral projection. He talks about that as well. It comes up. In the mind of the person employing it, the source of the white light can be anything from a loving creator god to a vaguer cosmic power. All seem equally effective. The one requirement for wrapping oneself in white light is that the person using it must feel assured that it will protect him or her against unwanted visitors. I cannot recall right off the top of my head whether or not it was white light, but the idea of enveloping yourself in a protective light comes up also in Patrice Chaplin's book, The Portal, as she is going on her journey across the square of Venus. She's instructed to envelop herself in a light. She's also instructed to, and it's only mentioned very briefly, but I employ it, putting a green lighted pyramid, envisioning a green lighted pyramid over yourself. You can even put it over your house, over an area. But that is a technique that she was taught in during her experience. Good book. Good book. But yeah, you got to feel assured that it will protect him or her against the unwanted visitors. A firm sense of inviolable rights is required. The veteran UFO researcher Virgil Staff of Northern California referred me to an item in the July 1990 issue of the Nevada Aerial Research Group, the NARG, which states in part, "This awareness indicates that it is possible to avoid those brainwave patterns that aliens would seek in their selection process by wrapping oneself in white light. This awareness suggests that in the first place, the least likely person an alien would seek would be one whose brainwave pattern indicates a socially strong and individualistic, or human, entity. When you have a strong identification knowing who in fact you really are, and have a strong connection with the spiritual essence of the highest, without much fear and without being swayed or easily influenced, you are less likely to become a candidate for abduction." Know thyself, baby. That's ancient Greeks. Goes all the way back. Another little bit of a highlight. Lori Briggs in 1975 was 21 years of age. From earliest childhood, oh yeah, this is a good one. From earliest childhood, she had an instinctive realization of what she calls her own sound. I would be interested to hear what you guys have to say about this. Do you have awareness of your own sound? A metaphysical technique she used to relax or meditate by concentrating on it and amplifying it at will. I mean, I don't know if it's an internal sound, but the sound that I have used to relax and meditate with is it's the sound that I focus on. It sounds like wind blowing through tall grass or blowing through trees. It sounds like a cool breeze through tall trees. And it is consistent. And I wonder if that could be the sound that maybe she's referencing. We have a little excerpt here. From Lori Briggs, the harder I concentrated on my own sound, the louder that the high-pitched sound got from the aliens. I finally broke it because I was focused so much on my own sound. I broke it. It stopped, and I was released. And there I was again. I was frozen, and that's when it took everything in my power to break it. I knew I had to move. That's the only way to get out of that state. So I summoned up all my willpower and I moved. Then it was broken. Compelling. Another little bit of a highlight here. After an indefinite stay aboard the ship, Lori Briggs felt drained and fatigued. Wishing to be relieved of the stress, she instinctively began to make her own sound. The entities seemed startled and abruptly told her it was time to go. Lori got up from the table and pushed a button near the door of the room. The door opened, but the creatures objected, explaining that it was better for her to go back the way she came. They then wrapped her in light again, telling her that the light was good and energizing, and that they did not want her to feel fatigued from the experience. Sure. They didn't want me to have bad feelings about it, she stated. Another excerpt, she intuitively felt that they wanted her for breeding purposes, and this was not something in which she wanted to participate. As they continued to insist that she come with them, she instinctively started to make her own sound again. The entities countered by making a high-pitched sound, as if they were trying to force their will upon her. Lori intensified her own sound more and more. Eventually, the creatures abruptly disappeared, and their sound ceased. I know the depiction in South Park of the psychic magician battles, I know that is silly, but here we have just like all pretenses are stripped away. And at the base layer, Laurie is saying, no, this is what I hear. And I hear what I generate, what I decide, not what you are imposing. And again, they dropped any kind of pretense and, no, come with us, it'll be fun. We don't want you to feel bad. And they just they launched their own sound at her. And so a battle of sound wills ensued. I know. But still, there it is. No me, not you. And it will be exemplified here in this instance as I'm going to focus on my own internal sound as primary and not allow yours to take over as the thing that I am unwittingly having to focus on. The metaphysical technique of internal sound may strike some readers as strange, but the concept of becoming aware of one's own sound is an old yogic doctrine. Vedic literature as early as 2000 BC discusses the subject in detail. Some internal sounds called nadis, which are defined as sounds that can be heard during meditation by the meditator's inner ear. According to the ancient teachings, when a person becomes aware of these sounds through various meditative techniques, it signifies a certain state of spiritual development. Whoa. Interesting that there's literature that goes way, way back talking about it. Resistance Technique 8. Appeal to spiritual personages. Appeal to spiritual personages. Appeal to spiritual personages is equally effective for experiences who are fully awake and by those who are already paralyzed and in an altered state. It requires faith in a spiritual realm where compassionate forms of life exist. It is perhaps the most powerful technique yet discovered, since it is readily available to a majority of experiencers, and the logic behind it is backed up by all major religions of the world. There is solid proof that spiritual beings interact positively with human beings, as demonstrated by the miracles performed in sacred places throughout the world, pre- and post-Christian times. Since verified miracles have occurred through the intercession of various holy personages, it is logical to assume that spiritual beings such as God, Jesus, guardian angels, and saints are in some way in charge of answering fervent appeals for all kinds of help. Just as stout-hearted experiencers feel within themselves that they have inviolable rights, giving them the ability to protect themselves, less fearless individuals who feel protected by spiritual forces outside themselves are likewise protected. It is the confidence that one is protected that brings about success. Now, there are times, I've come across certainly reports where people will invoke the name of Jesus and it doesn't work. And then I do hear reports and read reports of people who will invoke the name of Jesus and it does work. I know Tom Montalk has written about this, and it may have to do with the kind of being actually involved, whereas it may be an entity that is on a hierarchical system that subscribes to the levels of authority that Jesus is at the top of. And that's when it works. And if it's entities that aren't there, then maybe they're not going to respond to that kind of imbued authority. Or, invoked authority. I don't know. I myself have not attempted that one. I would be interested to know what your experiences are. Because these are all potential tools in our utility belt. And however we can break these down to make them as clearly actionable as possible, no matter what we're dealing with, because I think no matter what we're dealing with, we're going to be dealing with the understanding, the in-our-face understanding that reality, the world, is replete with beings that we just can't pick up with our basic 5 senses, but they are there. They are here. So how to engage and contend. Now, my interview with Nate, the jungle pirate wizard, was fantastic in that he goes into great detail about how to engage via reciprocity and relation building with beings that are willing to engage, and giving more than you're getting in terms of building a relationship, whether it's with another person or a discarnate entity, seems to work well in his lived experience. And so that might be another tool in our toolbox. And it speaks to just saying, thank you, guardian angel. Thank you, my spirit team, for hooking me up and keeping me safe. There is something to learning to pray to your guardian angel. And even the ancient Greeks discussed that we all had a daimon, good and bad one, but that we had a daimon that was looking out for us. I can't remember who it was off the top of my head again. Maybe it was Socrates. I'm going to look it up. Hold on. Oh, it was Socrates. All right, great. Yeah, Socrates described the inner voice as a divine sign that never told him what to do, but consistently warned him against impudent or erroneous actions. So yeah, I mean, even the ancient Greeks, they had clear descriptions of the experience of non-corporeal guidance, help, and hey, don't do that advice. This is not some woo-woo stuff. This is not basic, childlike, wishful thinking. This is documented human experience that has been going on. And so it is worth considering and cultivating in ways in which you resonate with, in ways in which we can gird and empower ourselves to the reality of the situation. Right, okay, and again, so it's repeated over and over again. It is the confidence that one is protected that seems to work. I know, because I know I have heard and greatly appreciate the people who share their experiences that seem absolutely bone-chilling when it comes to being taken. And I hope that they are able to wrest themselves from the imposition that they are placed in, the violation that is occurring. Because you don't deserve it. We as human beings don't deserve it. We are awesome. All of us. And we have got to make sure we can tell each other that before anything else. Maybe that can lead to more empowerment too. I don't know. But that's what I'm all about. All right, last technique, resistance technique 9, repellents. Gray bug spray. Repellents. Herbs, flower, essences, and essential oils are proving effective as resistance techniques. Experiment with these carefully, as the strengths needed for individual experiences have not been determined. Yarrow, St. John's wort, and pennyroyal, traditionally used for defense against harassing spirits, have been reported effective against harassing entities in current research. Caution, pennyroyal has been used traditionally to induce abortions. Salt has been used traditionally as a repellent and has been used successfully by at least one experiencer. Practitioners of Wicca use salt to keep away unpleasant spirits on Halloween. Tossing it over your shoulder. My exposure to ceremonial magic, you would draw a circle and stand in the center of a salt circle for protection. Iron bars, crucifixes, and crosses of iron have traditionally been used to ward off incubus and succubus attacks. Metal fans and bar magnets crossed over the chest have recently been reported to help against abductors. Except metal fans and bar magnets. Experiment with bar magnets to attain the polarity that works best for you. Interesting. I know that putting strong magnets at certain parts of the brain tend to open people up to more psychic-like experiences, more strengthened intuition. I've also heard that putting a magnet around your head could be dangerous. So proceed with caution. This is not medical advice. Okay, I think we're going to get to it here. Yeah, some of the drawings in here are pretty freaky. Okay. Yes, here we go. This is the comparison to the jinn. It is fascinating to compare the young Iranian American's information with the jinn characteristics that Gordon Crichton lists in his FSR article, A Brief Account of the True Nature of the UFO Entities. 1, in their normal state, they are not visible to ordinary human sight. 2, they are, however, capable of materializing and appearing in the physical world and can make themselves visible or invisible at will. 3, they can change shape and appear in any sort of guise, large or small. 4, they are able to appear in the guise of animals. 5, they are inveterate liars and deceivers and delight in bamboozling and misleading mankind with all manner of nonsense. 6, they are addicted to the abduction or kidnapping of humans. 7, they delight in tempting humans into sexual intercourse, and Arabic literature abounds with accounts of this kind of contact by mankind with jinn goodies and baddies. 8, the jinns are wont to snatch up humans and teleport or transport them almost instantly, setting them down again miles away. That has been a recurring experience in many contact and abduction reports. Fascinating overlaps there, I think. All right, we're getting to the end of it. Last couple of highlights here. Most important, perhaps for the purposes of this book, Bullard states that presence of mind may well be the key to resistance success. Presence of mind correlates nicely with confidence, self-esteem, and experiencers' conviction that their inalienable rights are being violated. Have that confidence. Check out that Sound of Music song. I have confidence. Okay, so yeah, here's an interesting section about sometimes it's not working or objections to what has been presented in this book. It is a well-known fact that some abductees have tried what they consider to be fend-off techniques and have failed to drive away their harassing abductors. Likewise, most colleagues who specialize in abduction research deny that resistance techniques work. They point out examples in the UFO literature as well as unpublished cases in their own files where abductees have tried anger, etc., against abductors without success. For example, in the well-received book The Allagash Abductions by veteran UFO researcher Raymond Fowler, an abductee reported that while he was undergoing examination by fairly typical-looking Greys, he focused all his willpower and every ounce of his strength in an attempt to move his head enough to get a good look at his abductors. This is, I believe, also the reference that I made to the Jesse Michaels episode. Even though he was young and extremely strong, he barely managed to move his head more than an inch or two. The unidentified type of paralysis that immobilized him was beyond his strength to break. As a result, the experiencer became convinced the resistance against abduction did not work. But again, in the Jesse Michaels episode, he talks about that and says they freaked out, warped away from him, and then warped back with hockey pucks that they put on his shins that held him down. And he and his twins developed I'm going to say benign tumors in the spots that they put those things down on. I'll have to watch the episode again. It was a good episode. Another example is an author of another recent book on UFO abductions. When the technique of righteous anger was described to her by a colleague of mine, she dismissed the subject as being totally impractical. She, like many other experiencers, believe that there is absolutely no way abductees can rid themselves of continued harassment. She admits that righteous anger or some other technique might temporarily chase away abducting aliens, but that invariably they come back. In her experience, even though abductees might be rid of their visits for 2 or 3 years, they nevertheless return. And upon returning, their abducting methods are more assertive and become impossible to break. The same view that resistance is useless is fairly typical of most abduction researchers. And again, I cannot appreciate the courage enough when it comes to all of you online today that discuss your experiences. It gives me confidence to hear you talk, even though what you say and what you have gone through and the fact that you are going through these things and yet here and sharing it the way you do, that is super powerful. And I cannot appreciate it enough. It is part of the reason why I want to talk about this, because that's not right that you're going through those things. And it's got to stop. We got to figure out a way to stop it. That's why this book is a great starting point, but I know it may not be, in some cases, it might not be enough. I don't know, though. I don't know. And I don't know what my experience was, but whatever it was, I was able to break out of it both times with great effort. I hope that something like this is able to aid you in some way. And I would absolutely love to converse with you about your experiences, about the heaviness of it, about just the scariness of it, the frighteningness of it, and the fact that you are still here and able to talk about it. Again, to me, that is super powerful in and of itself. All right, 3 aspects of the abduction problem provide at least partial answers to the above objections. First, all of the resistance techniques put forward in this book need to be carefully focused against the abductors, and this focus must contain an inherent desire on the part of the experiencers to assert their inalienable rights against intrusion. Second, there must be a total lack of hatred and negative emotion toward the entities. Difficult to do. For any negativity directed against them lessens the effect and might even empower them more. In other words, the focus must be totally positive. The intruders must be treated as just another order of intelligent creation that has no God-given right to harass us, but is stepping out of line. I guess it's like finding a snake in your toilet. Or, I'll tell you, a spider, a big, fat, just hairy spider was outside our back door. And I was going outside. I was like, oh, man, I don't hate you. In fact, I think spiders are great, but damn, you can't be there, man. And so, I took a stick and pushed all of the webbing and the spider out of the corner of the doorway. I had to dive down. I was like, no, you can't be there. This is a door for us. I didn't kill it. I didn't smash it. I didn't use any kind of violence. But I was like, nah, man, you can't be there. Can't be there. It is not a place for you. Will that work? I don't know. Third, a combination of techniques works best. By remaining positive, experiencers and abductees can regard the harassing visitors as other types of intelligent creatures who have been created by the same God who created humans. This implies that they have an intrinsic right to live within the normal boundaries of whatever environment their creator gave them, but have no right to interfere in ours. According to the great works of philosophy and the doctrines of the major world religions, human beings were given the physical earth to live in. This implies that whatever or whoever abductors actually are, they also have been given their own domain. The problem seems to be that these unidentified creatures are intruding into our earthly space-time continuum from their own space-time or dimension. They do not belong here. I have that underlined. If they did, they would be physical as we are physical. They would be detectable at all times by the 5 senses and human instrumentation. These so-called alien abductors, however, are definitely not creatures who normally exist together with us on our physical Earth. Okay, last part, I think. Last highlighted section here. John White gets to the heart of the matter when he addresses the behavior of the abductors, for their behavior demonstrates the only thing that we really know about them. Their behavior clearly violates our own personhood. My acceptance of them is entirely conditional and must be earned. How? By demonstrating that they respect human beings as having inalienable rights. It's nothing more than the golden rule. If they won't respect our personhood and our property, then they're predators and deserve whatever means we can take to protect ourselves. I mean, that's a nice way of saying what a lot of Carla Turner says, which is these things, they are no good. Whatever these are. And I don't think these things are all the things, right? I think we are living in a jungle filled with all kinds of life seen and unseen. And these are some things that are in there with us, but not from our primary level of existence. Yet they have a predatory nature to intrude and violate. If they won't respect our personhood and our property, then they're predators and deserve whatever means we can take to protect ourselves from them. Yeah, the discarnate plasma intelligences that are being discussed, I don't know if they're the same thing. I don't think so. I don't think that Hecate is the same thing as a gray alien. I don't think that the angel Saint Raphael from the Old Testament that hooked up Tobias is the same thing. Because there is no kind of violation going on there. He just walks with him, points out how to use a fish, hook up his dad, get married to a cutie. Like, it's all good. That is not the same kind of thing that is going on that we just discussed. So I think there's a lot. And the idea of utilizing spirit communication to engage with beings not like these a-holes that we were talking about earlier here, the Greys, and whomever may be working with them, might be to our benefit, might be a tool in our utility belt. Even if that is simply giving thanks and being grateful for our daimon that we've got, our guardian angel, I think that's valuable. And again, I would love to hear about and discuss with you, those who are willing to discuss with me your experiences. Because if we can get the conversation started about, hey, you're having these experiences and that is messed up, but you're also in the position, and some of you are already doing this, like Fringe, Hiker Gal, Meg, I believe your name is. You guys are awesome in your ability to discuss what's going on. UFO Twitter spaces, man, like tip of the spear. And so the more we can just talk about this and try to develop actionable conversation, I think the better off ultimately we will be. So thank you. And thank you for hanging and coming through this little book review with me. I look forward to more discussion, more empowerment, more talking about what we can do about it. More power to you. Catch you on the next one.